Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. You are tuned into Think Like a Filmmaker, the still photographer's journey to creating motion pictures, hosted by Sony. And for that, we need the man himself, Jeff Berlin, cinematographer, photographer, Sony ambassador. Jeff, what's going on, man?
Hey, how are you? It's good to see you, Derek. How you been?
Good to see you again, although not in person. Last time was a lot better. It's a lot better in person.
Well, it's good to be here regardless.
It is. It's good to have you. And look, I'm gonna put it out there, everyone. You guys are in for a treat. I know I say this every once in a while, but just in previewing the presentation that you guys are about to see, it's just I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's gonna be one of our best that we've had on here. So Jeff, I'm looking forward to it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thanks for this opportunity. I hope everybody enjoys it. And one thing I wanted to say is if anybody has any questions, I love these to be interactive. So please do, reach out with any questions and I'll try to address them as we go along.
There you go. Well, now you guys know the drill, but really tune in, enjoy this, ask your questions. I'm going to let Jeff take over and see you in a bit.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here. Let me see how I can do this. Perfect with share sound, because I do have a little bit of sound. Bam. Okay. So that's that. Then I'll start from here. Excellent. And all right. Good. So does it all look good to you guys?
Looks good.
Okay. Very good. All right. So here we go. So I am Jeff Berlin, and what we're going to talk about today is my journey, the transition that I've gone through from being a still photographer, background in fashion and celebrity portrait, to working in motion pictures, cinematography, DPing, working on films, and what that transition has been like, because it has been, let's just say I underestimated how different the worlds could be. And it's been quite the journey to become conversant as a director of photography. So just what I wanted to do really quick in the beginning is just establish myself with you guys and show you some of my work as a still photographer, kind of stuff from my history and things that I've done. So this was an editorial that I shot with two actors. It was like a celebrity fashion story for a magazine based here in LA for the Hunger Games, two actors from the Hunger Games. And this was something I shot. I spent 6 years living in Paris and Milan. Excuse me, I'm just getting over the flu from last week, so a little bit of a cough, so please excuse me. But this was a beauty hair editorial that I shot for a French magazine called Madame Figaro. And, I always did a lot of stuff in studio and setting up big lights. And one thing that actually back in the day, this was, a while ago, this was years ago, this was shot with HMI, Fresnel HMIs. And those are actually film lights that are still being used today. So, one thing that kind of gave me an advantage is the kind of lights that I was using prepared me very well for the film world that I'm in now. In fact, if you ever get a chance to shoot with a Fresnel HMI, I highly recommend it. The quality of light is amazing. So here's a couple more from Paris and Milan, or L'Oreal campaign that I shot. And the shot on the right, excuse me, was from Milan for an editorial there. I used to shoot a lot of teen editorial. This was Teen Magazine. I was shooting for Teen Magazine like almost every month, and that was a lot of fun. Always just shooting new things. Celebrity portraits. Patrick Dempsey on the left. That was for Bentley, or for Airstream actually, which was the same publicist as Bentley actually. And so that was him sitting on the door, sitting in the door of his Airstream trailer on the set of Grey's Anatomy. Kurt Russell on the right, we were visiting with him. He's a pilot, and so we were actually shooting for an aviation magazine. Jamie Presley, actress, I shot this here on location in Hollywood. Amanda Peet, this was shot for a gallery for a TV network. I've done a lot of, I'm also, like I said, I'm a pilot, so I've done a lot of aviation stuff. I always kind of try to kind of pull my passions into my work. And that's one thing I've done with aviation. And so these are two covers for Flying magazine that I've done. And just another shot for Flying. This was shot in the hills outside of Reno, Nevada, where they do all the air racing. And just a hangar shot. I loved this hangar so much. I wanted to live there or take it as my studio, because the light inside the hangar was just incredible. And that's my friend's airplane. They had just done a whole paint job on it, so we were highlighting that. And I've shot a bunch of times for Garmin Aviation, and this was a shot from, it's a little bit pixelated, but this is a shot I recently shot the campaign for their aviation smartwatches. And I've also done a fair amount of rodeo and Western pictures. So one of my shots ended up on the cover of the Reno Rodeo magazine. I'm trying to move quickly because we have a lot to get to. Again, really for me, it's always about the people. Even rodeo, where there's a lot of action in the arena. This is probably one of my only action shots, because for me, it's all about the people. I love the people. I love the fashion of it. It's kind of like, said a fashion photographer, loose at a rodeo, and this is what you get. And again, same thing, beautiful girls, handsome guys. This was for a story that I was profiled for Cowboys and Indians magazine for my Western work. And again, just incredible characters, and it's just a very rich, target-rich world. And again, another shot from Cowboys and Indians magazine, another tear sheet from that. And it's always fun when you can kind of tie fashion and Western together. And this was a story for that. With it's funny because the story behind this, I was looking for the best model I could find. The guy in this, his name is Cash. He's actually a real cowboy, and he's out here in the LA area. And I got to him, I connected to him through some rodeo friends. But our girl, I was looking for the most all-American, just cowgirl model. And this was our girl. Her name is Anouk, and she's from Holland. So if that'll tell you, it's kind of funny. So anyway, getting into really the crux of why we're here today, what is a film or video and what makes it cinematic? So really, if you think about it, why it's been such an organic, transition. I mean, organic is, it's a good word, because if you think about it, film is 1 second of film is 24 individual frames. So really, you're still a photographer as a filmmaker. So really, to become a good filmmaker, just like I did as a still photographer, you develop and cultivate your sensibility and you educate your eye. So to be a better photographer, you look at photography. And to be a better filmmaker, a better DP, you look at film, you look at TV. This is a list of films that I wanted to share with you guys. My mentor in this journey is a very established director and DP. And he sent me a list over a few days. He sent me a list of films that I should have seen. And if I haven't seen them, I better start sitting down and watching 1 or 2 a day. And so this is a real important list of films that any DP wannabe should have seen. But you also look at photography and fine art, even as a cinematographer. So for me, for example, I'm going to skip forward real quick here. I was watching Days of Heaven, which if you go back to my list, it's the 3rd one down. So Days of Heaven was an extraordinary film with Richard Gere. It's by Terrence Malick, and the DP is Nestor Almendros. And so I saw this scene towards the beginning of Days of Heaven, and I was like, oh my God, this looks just like a Caravaggio painting of chiaroscuro, in a chiaroscuro style of painting. So this is a very famous painting by Caravaggio. And I mean, you can see the influence of how art and fine art and classical art has influenced this scene. It's just an incredible thing to me. And composition, of course, is super, super important. So obviously, as a fashion photographer, who do we have here? If on any fashion photographer should know these images and who shot them. For example, on the left, it's Dovima with the Elephants by Avedon. And on the right, that's Irving Penn. Excuse me. And then on the left, other iconic images by masters of the 20th century. You have William Eggleston. You have, Dorothea Lange and, Slim Aarons. I mean, these are all images that are seared into my mind, as a still photographer. Like I became encyclopedic in what fashion photography is done, what art photography is out there. And, I could walk into a gallery and I could look at the walls and say, oh, this is by this person, that's by that person. And, for example, this is just a journalist. There's no significance to this photo, except that I'm actually shooting a feature film next March. And this is actually a reference for one of the scenes in the feature film that we're going to be shooting. And so it's mastering, it's, who's done what, knowing who came before you, but it's also finding your references and, leveraging them from wherever they come. And here again, Peter Limburg, a very famous story for what I think that was for French Vogue with the alien that had just crash landed on Earth. It's an amazing story with Helena Christensen. And then, of course, Ansel Adams, Moonrise Hernandez. I mean, again, just all of these iconic images, it's good to have them kind of tucked away in your brain. So when you're on set, you have all of this to pull from. And again, references. This is obviously, Blade Runner 2049, Deakins, who is, the master, just a classic, incredible frame. And this is a film that's a little bit less well known, but I thought it was shot so well for so many different reasons. The color palette, the framing, it was just so photographic in how it was shot and formal. So this is a film called The Danish Girl. Just really, really lovely film. Eddie Redmayne and Alicia Vikander. And then, of course, this is from The Graduate, which is also on my list. And I actually was asked to rewatch it recently by the director of the film that I'm going to be shooting early in the spring. And again, it's all about framing, beautiful frames, amazing, choices of creative choices, lens choices. And so Steven Bernstein, who has been my mentor through a lot of this journey, he's probably best known. I mean, he's done a lot of amazing work, but he is the guy that shot Monster with Charlize Theron that won her the Oscar. So he's an incredible DP and director that I have a huge amount of gratitude to. Knowing my background in fashion and beauty, one of the things that he's told me over and over, he's hammered into me, is to get pretty out of my head. And so I really think that's a very interesting piece of advice from a master, especially for a guy like me who comes from a world where, you're looking to shoot the most beautiful images you can. So these are some notes from the director of a film that I recently worked on. I did not shoot the film, but I was on the crew. And these are notes to the crew, to the upper levels of the crew and the DP. I want to shoot 2:3:5:1, but I want it cut out of a spherical image. We will need to prepare the monitors with frame lines. My favorite lenses for this will be 18 and 27 millimeter primes as much as possible. The camera will be moving a lot, often pushing in, pulling out, going to a Dutch tilt, craning, dropping. Sometimes the camera will be running at 3 or 6 frames per second, as opposed to 24, but not when on faces. So if we can't ramp, I will need to hide small dissolves, something we can tell the actors. Sometimes we can tell the actors not to blink, but that doesn't help performance. The palette in the shelter will go towards the green part of the spectrum, sometimes blue as well. The light will be fairly soft, the contrast low. The green will help create depth if the faces are slightly warmer. I would like key lights at eye level or much lower, with the second key slightly above or below. The backgrounds can drop off slightly. I don't like super sharp images ever. I'm going to read that again because people talk so much about resolution and sharpness. I don't like super sharp images ever. I like tilted frames for this a lot. I like things coming into frame suddenly, the subject. I like whip pans and 3-frame push-ins on a dolly. I like jump cuts a lot. And again, here, I like jump cuts a lot. And I like small shutter angles. And we'll get into what that means, shutter angle. But these are all notes that were sent by the director to the crew to get on the same page creatively. You know, and I think that this is really a super interesting insight. This film is a comedy, but most of all, it's a thriller, a surreal one. So please look at, and again, here is a list of films that this director wanted the DP to watch for notes and to be on the same page creatively. So one of the things that's been really interesting for me in my journey from stills to photo, or from stills to film to motion, has been the vocabulary. It's a completely different language. So this is our little, you know, Dr. Seuss machine where the photo words go in on one end and the film words come out the other. So, you know, you have tripod becomes sticks, and f-stop becomes t-stop, and ISO, you have dual-based ISO, and excuse me, shutter speed becomes shutter angle, and then a beauty shot, for example, becomes, you have a wide close-up or a medium close-up or a close-up or an extreme close-up. And then you have JPEG, RAW, and TIFF, obviously. Well, you have RAW, you have S-Log3, you have XOCN, you have ProRes, you have H.264. I mean, there's so many, you have aspect ratios and spherical and anamorphic lenses and anamorphic D-squeeze and French overs and dirty overs. And all of a sudden, there's all this technology and these new words and new terms, and what do they mean? So one thing I wanted to dispel right now is that as we move forward, I'm not going to step you through how to set up your camera, because there are too many good YouTube channels out there that will step you through that. And I just think, you know, in the time that we have, it's really a waste of our time. If you want to figure out how to set up your camera, there's plenty of great resources for that rather than right now. But regardless of that, you know, as a pilot, we always say, you know, you really, there's so many cool airplanes out there, but you want to pick the best airplane for the mission. You're not going to fly this aerobatic airplane, airshow airplane, from New York to LA, you know, to be comfortable. You're going to fly that airplane to fly an airshow and go upside down and do loops and spins and rolls. If you want to fly from New York to LA, you're going to pick an airplane that's comfortable and goes long distance without having to stop. So you do the same thing with cameras. I always like to pick the best camera for the mission. So for example, on a feature film, you might want to shoot it on the Sony Venice. That might be the best camera for the mission. And this was actually my camera. I own a Venice, and this was a film that we were shooting not too long ago. In the buildup that we had, we were shooting with anamorphic lenses on this one. Or you could shoot with the FX3 or the FX6, which I recently did a film for Sony about a boxer, and we used both of these, and it would have been ridiculous to use a Venice. These were the perfect devices for that film, for mobility, for ease of use, for the compact crew that we were on, and for quality of image. Or really, you know, they say the best camera is the camera you have on you. So, you know, for example, the Xperia Pro I just came back from Europe. Maybe that's where I kind of caught this little bit of flu that I'm getting over. But I was walking around with an Xperia Pro I, which has the largest sensor in a mobile phone. And I was taking a lot of pictures. But I recently shot a film on Xperia, another version of the Xperia 1, Xperia 1 Mark II, I think it was. The Xperias have the Cinema Pro mode, which really functions like a cinema camera emulator. So it takes your phone and it makes it function like an actual camera. And so here I was at my friend's cattle ranch outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we're shooting him putting the bridle on a horse. And this is kind of the buildup, and you can see that because the camera functions as a true cinema camera, you actually have to use ND filters. And so the name of the piece that we shot was called The Wrangler. And I'm going to just show you a little clip of that. But the whole point is, you can create really good content with whatever you have on you. And so the colors, the color space in the Xperia is Venice CS. That's like the main color space that I would recommend you shoot in. And it gives you a lot of latitude in post where you can actually color grade and pull a lot of detail and pump up the colors. And so let's take a look at what that looks like real quick. And again, this is video through Zoom, so you'll have to bear with the technical, limitations that we're running into.
I always thought being a cowgirl would be kind of fun. I love ranching. I didn't grow up doing it.
To help each other out, we call it neighboring. One of the neighboring ranches is moving cows and they need a little help.
And not only do you get help, but you gain best people in your life and really, really cool friends. We're just too far away from anything to not help each other out here.
It's a job and it's a mindset. That's really is our way of life.
So that's just a cut down really of the larger piece. But you can see that even with a phone, you can create really good content. And I like to call this the democratization of filmmaking, because what all these devices have done, the cameras like the FX3 or the Alpha 1 or the A7S III or the Xperia even, or the new FX30, it's brought the legitimate real filmmaking tools and made them much more accessible and affordable. So for example, you have a new Venice 2 on the right, that's all in with all the licenses and all the, fully kitted out the way it needs to be kitted out. You're looking at a $90,000 buy-in for a Venice 2. But, you could get an FX3 for, barely $4,000. And, not for nothing. And I'm going to get into this in a minute, but you'll see that there are projects, TV shows that use this combination of cameras exactly as like these two. So what is dual base ISO? This is one of the things that I've had to learn since, during this transition. So in the Venice, you have ISO 500 and 2500. And you see in this graph, you have the same amount from 18% gray, middle gray. At ISO 500, you have +6 stops and -9 stops of dynamic range, 15 stops of dynamic range. Plenty of latitude into the highlights and lots of latitude into the shadows. And it's the same at 2500 and 500. And how does that happen? Because if if you think about it, ISO 500 is great in when it's brighter and it's daylight, but 2500 it gives you great low light capability, and you're still getting the same quality and dynamic range. So the way that this is working is digital imaging sensors perform best when sent to their native or base ISO. It's at this base ISO value that you will realize a very clean image with low noise, your best signal to noise ratio, and most likely the widest dynamic range. At the base ISO setting, there is no amplification or gain voltage being added to the signal coming from the sensor. Adding gain or increasing ISO to make an image appear brighter also adds noise. At each base ISO level, since there's no such amplification being added to the signal as explained above, the sensor captures the same clean image. So theoretically, and in reality, in practice, with the Venice and with some other cameras that Sony makes, like the FX9, and FX6 and FX3, you have these dual base ISO values where when you're set at them, you have a super clean image at either a very high ISO like 2500 or 4000 and at a lower ISO like 500 or 800. And here, for example, you can see FX3 in your S-Log3, low base is 640 and your high base is 12,800. So, you could shoot, what this is saying is you could shoot at 12,800 ISO and, shoot really digging deep into the low light and still get really, really high quality images. And so here, let's look at NDs and why NDs are important in filmmaking. And keep in mind, with these high base ISOs on the FX9, the FX6, 4000, you could shoot outside. So you need ND filters on your camera to allow you to maintain your 180-degree shutter. So what is the 800, excuse me, the 180-degree shutter rule? So for a 24 frame per second frame rate, you want to expose the image for half that time. So your shutter in, let's say, an alpha camera, because it won't show 1/48th of a second, which is a true 180-degree shutter, it's going to be 1/50th, 1/50 or 1/50th of a second in an alpha camera. But back in the day, in film, motion picture cameras, with film cameras, you had what they had, a spinning shutter, where the shutter would spin. It was circular and it would spin, and the exposure duration, it would cover the gate, they called it, for half the time. So a 180-degree shutter, for the amount of time that the film was in the gate, where it was being held and exposed to light, it was being exposed to light for half the time it was there. So you can see a 45-degree shutter exposed it for an eighth of the time that it was there. Or you could do a 90th of a 90-degree shutter, 45-degree, 90-degree, any increment that you want. A 270-degree shutter would expose it for 3/4 of the time that it's there. So cinema cameras with a rotating mechanical shutter, open angle of the rolling shutter controls exposure of each frame. So the narrower shutter angle makes a shorter exposure time, and the wider shutter angle makes a longer exposure time. So 180 is standard, 270 is a longer exposure time, 45 is more narrow. So 45, for example, that could be like that Saving Private Ryan effect. But what's 270 look like? And here you can see your frame per second on the top left, your exposure. So you're at base ISO 500 on the right, on the middle. And on the right, you see you can have your shutter at 180 degrees. That's actually a Venice control panel, actually, right there. So this is an example of what a 270-degree shutter angle would look like. And this is from a music video that I shot not too long ago. And you can see how the image is just, it's a little bit more motion blur, it's just more wiping, and it's just kind of a really cool effect, and it works well in that. Another thing that really you don't really think about too much as a still photographer that I have become very, very concerned about, and it's very, very top of mind for me, is bit depth as a filmmaker. Bit depth is really super important to me. So, a lot of cameras have an 8-bit or a 10-bit bit depth. And until recently, a lot of the Sony Alpha cameras had 8-bit video, which gives you 256 levels of brightness per channel. But a lot of the newer cameras are going to 10-bit, which gives you 1024 levels. And so what this means is it gives you more detail and more gradation, more levels of brightness and more colors. So 8-bit still gives you a ton of color, 16.7 million different color variations, but 10-bit gives you over 1 billion different colors. The levels of gradation, the levels of subtlety are manifest when you just even make the jump from 8-bit to 10-bit, to the point that, you have so much more latitude, more gradation. And you can see here, these are literally, those are what 8-bit and 10-bit look like. So FX3, FX6 record internal 422 10-bit images. And what's the Venice records 16-bit, whoops. Oh, look at, hang on. The Venice records 16-bit linear raw XOCN. And so that's just the codec that it uses, XOCN. It means extended optical, extended tonal range, original camera negative. It's a mouthful. So 16-bit is really quite a jump from 10-bit. But one thing that's really important to know is that 10-bit is enough that there are shows like Dope Sick on Hulu that are shot on both the Venice and the FX3, and they're mixing the cameras together, and you would never know it. So they're using FX3, and I've talked to the DP who shoots the show about this. So he's recording internally 10-bit 422 on the FX3, and they're shooting it and pairing it with the Venice, which is shooting 16-bit, and the show looks great. So 16-bit obviously gives you the most latitude. While 8-bit gives you 256 levels per channel, 10-bit 1024 levels per channel. 16-bit gives you 281 billion and change colors and 65,000 and change levels per channel. So that tells you how many levels of gradation that you have from the darkest black to the highest of the highlight, the deepest in the shadow, the highest of the highlight. You have 65,000 plus levels of shade. That's an extraordinary ability to leverage. So when you have such color and dynamic range, you want to capture that. How do you capture the most dynamic range? By shooting log. So why do we shoot log? So really, if you're going to be shooting with really any of the cameras from the FX30 up to the Venice, you're going to want to shoot S-Log3, S-Gamma3.Cine. And S-Log3 is designed for 14 plus stops of dynamic range. So Rec 709, Rec 709, which is a lot of the TVs out there, you're getting 7 to 9 stops of dynamic range. But you want to capture the most dynamic range, and that's why we shoot log. You want to have the most information. What you're allowing the sensor in the camera to take and record the most information that it's possible, that it's capable of recording. So you're going to set your camera to XAVCS I 4K. If you want 4K, you could go to HD. It's up to you. And one other thing that I want to add though is that S-Cinetone is an option in the FX cameras, and what it offers is a Venice color science, but it's a little bit more refined than S-Log, and you'll see why in a second. But you can see here, this is S-Cinetone right out of the camera. It's designed to have to go through less post-production work before being ready to show. But log is really where you're going to get your highest quality. And it gives you the most options in post. It gives you the most dynamic range and exposure latitude. And with the S-Log3 and the Sony cameras, contrary to what a lot of people believe, you don't need to overexpose it to keep it clean. You can expose it normally on meter. And here's a little bit of BTS from this boxing film that we did. And we're shooting with the FX6. And this is a champion boxer that we shot. This was for Sony, actually. And this is a boxer who, he has a really great story where he lives in San Diego and he travels over to Tijuana every day to train with his coach. And we followed him a bunch of times, and it was a super cool story. And we took that footage into Technicolor, which is now, the name has been changed to Picture Shop. And, you do a whole color grade on it. And so this is what it looked like raw. This is what log looks like. And then it comes, you process it and you add the contrast and the color and you do what you need to do. And again, here, this is what a log looks like. And, all the information is in there, but now you just have to bring it out. And aspect ratio is another thing that I've learned to play with. It's a creative choice. So for example, here, we decided the majority of the piece should be a 2-to-1 aspect ratio. And that's kind of very popular aspect ratio these days. But there was one part in the film where we wanted to make it look like like ABC Wide World of Sports, and make it look like a little bit more like TV, a little bit retro. So we added some grain to enhance the toppy highlights, and we changed the aspect ratio to 4:3, which is kind of a throwback to how TVs used to be. But, that's all technical stuff. Let's talk about creative, because, a lot of what I've learned in my journey from stills to DP has been learning how to leverage the creative things that I see, how to be creative and how to execute the creative. So here's an interesting exercise that a DP friend of mine who shoots a ton of television suggested, to me one day. We were actually at a restaurant, and he's like, what I do sometimes? He's like, a lot of time I'll sit in a restaurant and I'll look around, or I'll look at the person across from me and I'll think, if I was going to light this to look like this, how would I do that? And so now whenever I go into a restaurant, I think, how would I come into this room and create this scene and light this? And so, for example, here, this is a frame. It's actually not even a frame. It's a still of the monitor that we were looking at. We were shooting last month. This is a short film that a friend and I were shooting in a motel room. And this is where I was thinking, okay, if I go into a motel room, how do I make it look like a motel room, but make it look how I want it to look? So it should read like a motel room, but read right. And so, for example, let's say you're on a film and you want to make it look like there's sun coming in from outside the window. So one thing that I learned recently is that to do really good window light, you mix two sources. You mix a hard source and a broad soft source. So you have the broad soft source washing overall light in, and then you have the hard source that is giving some dimension to whatever's coming through the window and into the room. And another exercise, for example, this is back to that motel scene, the motel film that we were doing not too long ago. And we gelled all the lights on the outside of the motel to give it a little bit more of that kind of vapor look. And we had this car pull up and this guy get out. And so we wanted that vapor look to wash onto our guy. And how do you do that? So the way I did it this time was I had this Rotolite Titan X2 panel, and I dialed into the panel the same sodium vapor look, and I used that. And so that's the key light on this actor is the Titan X2. So it's essentially emulating the wash of light coming off the building in the same tone. So it's really cool to have a light that you can really just dial in any color, any gel. And again, just, going into restaurants, now I do it all the time. I highly recommend it. When you're sitting across from your friend at the table, how would you light that? This is a really interesting quote that a friend of mine who is no longer with us told me once when we were watching a film. Cinema is an art form that doesn't have a clock, by Anne H. This was a mind-blowing thing when she told me this. If you think about it, you are shooting out of sequence. You are putting together your film. The clock is subjective. You make the clock whatever you want it to be. So some of the rules of thumb and little things that, have helped me grow as a filmmaker. Always cover yourself with a master, a wide shot, which sets the tone and the atmosphere. Shoot the storyboard. but shoot more than the storyboard if possible. Shoot a ton. More shots gives you more cutting options. So whenever I'm shooting, I'm always looking for other angles and other shots to do. Composition, lens choice, lens type, aspect ratio, frame. How are we going to shoot this? How are we going to frame it? What is the final aspect ratio going to be? You know, you need to know that so you can set the frame lines on your monitors. Scene blocking and camera movement. What is that going to be? What is the intent of the scene? So more resolution. What are the, you know, there are the reasons that I'm doing all of this and the reasons that I'm shooting 4K or 6K or 5K or whatever it is I want to have, even though, again, I'm not going for always super sharpness, I want resolution. Resolution and sharpness are different things. I want resolution because I want more detail, because I want more post options to reframe, to stabilize, to zoom, to introduce a move if I have to. 4K or HD is easy to work with. I can pull high-res stills if I want. And of course, the higher the resolution, the better for compositing and visual effects. Rule of thirds, balance in frame. You know, classic framing. I mean, Rear Window, Hitchcock. I mean, my goodness. This is, I think, some Walter Mitty film. I forget the exact title with Ben Stiller. But again, it's just, you know, shoot wide to tight, inserts, details, shoot variations on good setups, blocking, the choreography of a scene. This is really, really important. So when I'm reading a scene or going through and, you know, and analyzing a scene, I'm thinking about the choreography of the scene, the blocking. I'm thinking about the light and the lens. So what am I analyzing as a DP? The choreography, the light, and the lens. How is the scene move? What's going on in the scene? What's happening? Where are they moving from or to? What's going on? The light, where is the light coming from? What is the light quality? And the lens, what lens are we shooting this on? If you shoot the rehearsal, it's not a rehearsal. It's just kind of a very funny meme that's floating around. But, you know, if you think about it, you want to watch rehearsals and work through all the issues in a scene and get everything dialed in. So this is from a film that I worked on a couple of years ago, where these two actresses were working their way around the room, and, you know, you have a real rule of thirds here, and this is where they ended up. And it was just, you know, through blocking and rehearsal and lens, we ended up with a nice frame at the end. So camera movement, very important. And I think this is hilarious. This is floating around. Maybe you guys have seen it, but you know, the clients, everything is a pan left, pan up, pan down. We know that's not true. And I'm not going to go through all the terms for camera movement now because we don't have time, but I thought this was really funny. Camera movement, though, I have very specific ideas about. Camera movement should have a motivation. I prefer to not just move the camera because I can. I like to say, let the action push the camera, or let the emotion push the camera. Use the camera movement to manipulate emotion and affect your audience psychologically. You're bringing your audience on a journey. So you want to affect their perception, and you want to affect them psychologically. To do this successfully, and this was a lesson I learned early, be intimately familiar with the script and the scenes you're shooting. Here's another video that'll show a little bit of that. It shows a push in, really, which is why you're kind of building up to this hero moment. So obviously, you know, he's the big boss and the ringleader, and, we're kind of ending up on this big hero moment. Also very important, and something that, I really, you kind of do it inherently as a still photographer, but it's very, very top of mind as a cinematographer. How you use focus, light, and shadow to direct your viewer's attention. So for example, here, another shot from the Danish girl, just really, Eddie Redmayne, just very isolated in his thoughts, the rest of the room and the rest of the world kind of falling away out of focus. And from Hell or High Water, just deep focus and just a really cool, warm tone light, just kind of putting you could feel, you could feel that you're there with them. Do not treat any of your shots like they're too precious to lose in the final edit. So here is a shot. This is a shot that we did. I was shooting a fashion video for a fashion designer named Norma Kamali. And we were shooting these models walking down the street. And she, as she was coming towards us, and this was the whole crux of this video, was about the objectification of women. And so, excuse me. So here we have this model walking towards us, and into our background walks a guy who turns around and checks out our model. And it was kind of the perfect shot for the film, but in the end, it ended up not working for the film. So we ended up not using it, even though it was perfect. So you can't get too married to it. I really wanted to use it, but at the end of the day, the editor and we all decided it wasn't the perfect shot, and there was something else that fit better. But it was kind of really funny that, that way that worked out. And then keep shooting. Don't delete in camera what might seem like a mistake. So if you're running around picking up B-roll, I was shooting this again, just a woman getting into it or out of a taxi, and it was all out of focus, and I was just trying to grab it, and that's what it looked like. But we ended up finding a use for it in the edit, and it worked. So if your model or actor can't get all the action right, break it down. So we were shooting our model, trying to get out of the back of a taxi in a very kind of elegant way that just wasn't working. And unfortunately, I don't have the video to this because the B&H censors have suggested that I not show it. But we have our model. What we ended up doing was breaking the motion down, where we taxi pulls up, we cut to her already standing, and then we do our camera move, and it works fine. But sometimes it really makes a difference to the scene if you can get the action in a oneer. What is a oneer? It's one shot. If you can, sometimes breaking it down, if that works, and it can be just the right solution if you can't get it in one. But there are times where getting it in one really, really can make all the difference and bring extra, extra emotion and drama and impact to that scene. And roll a lot, perhaps even rolling after cut. So for example, I was shooting another section of that fashion video, and we had our model having ice cream, and then we cut, and she was eating the ice cream, and she does this little thing where she's getting the ice cream off her chin there. And that was like after cut, but we were still rolling, and she didn't know we were rolling. It was the perfect moment. It was very cute. So very, very important. Move fast and shoot with the edit in mind. You're always shooting for the edit because it all has to work in the edit. The more material you have, the better it will come together in the edit. It becomes automatic. You're always starting to think about how, it's like a puzzle, how to make everything work in the edit. You want your cutaways, you want all your masters, you want everything together. It all fits together, and it becomes really just an exercise in just getting all your coverage. And again, cinema is an art form that doesn't have a clock. You make the shot how you want it, compress time, expand time, it doesn't matter. Cameras and lenses are part of the language that you're baking into the film. They are like a film stock. You know, that's where it's interesting, because as a still photographer, you have your camera, you have your lenses, you have your film. You know, you're not shooting film anymore, so you don't really have that. But, you know, you have your processes and whatever that you're using. But in film, the post-production, it's different. And the lens options are different. And so really with me, you know, I am thinking about lensing, especially as, you know, another character in the film. Do I want to shoot anamorphic? Do I want to shoot spherical? What kind of anamorphic? What kind of spherical? All these lenses have different qualities. And the cameras themselves, different qualities. So choose wisely. Sound and silence can make or break a project. We don't have time to get into sound. But sound, if you have amazing images and bad sound, you're finished. Filmmaking. So it's very easy to be a solo still photographer. I mean, yes, when you're in a studio doing a campaign, you have your crew, you have your hair, your makeup, your stylist, you know, you have your assistant. You know, I would sometimes have 3 assistants. I like that, especially depending on the kind of job that I'm doing. But filmmaking is always a team sport. Still photographer is the director, the DP, and the gaffer. On a film set, everyone has their role. Surround yourself. This is advice that I got early, and I live by it. Surround yourself with the best crew possible and empower them to do their best, and they will. Rely on your crew, chill out. So rely on your crew, let them support you and your vision, chill out, and focus on the creative. Shooting stills has prepared you very well for shooting motion. You have learned to see light. You have learned to construct a frame. You may have, excuse me, you may already have a shooting style, an identity to your work, and a voice. One thing I want to mention really quick about that. As I wrote this, I thought, that's interesting, because as a still photographer, you really want to have a style that identifies you, a style that individualizes you, that gives you an identity to your work. A cinematographer really really shouldn't have a style. A cinematographer really shouldn't have a style. You are there as a DP to support the vision of the director. So your style needs to fit the film that you're shooting. Important. As a photographer on set, you're the director, the DP, the gaffer, and the key grip. You've already experienced some of the key roles found on a film set. Leverage those experiences. Surround yourself with good collaborative people and go create. All right, so that's kind of the end. One thing that I wanted to mention that I kind of skipped over real quick before I get into references, I'm going to just take a quick minute to talk about NDs, because I realized that I kind of glossed over the need for ND filters. The reason we use ND filters, and the reason they're such a bigger part of your kit as a DP, is that you don't have the same tools, essentially, to control exposure as a cinematographer that you do as a still photographer. Because your shutter speed, your shutter angle, you want that 1/48th or 1/50th or 180-degree shutter most of the time. Oh, and one tip, if you're on a full-fledged cinema camera, another popular shutter angle is 172.8 degrees. And sometimes that helps with a little bit of flicker. But the reason you're using NDs is because you can't stop down on your lens to f/22 all the time, or t/22. You want to be wide, like t2 or t1.4 or t2.5, or wherever you are on the wider side. And what is the difference between T and f-stop? I should just mention that real quick. Photography lenses have an f-stop, f1.4, f2, f2.8. The what that f-stop describes is the actual opening of the aperture in the lens. A T-stop that you see in cinema lenses means how much light is being transmitted through the lens. So a T14 in your kit is going to always be a T14 through on a 40, a 50, a 65, an 80, a 24, a 28, a 17, whatever lens, T14 is always going to be T14. 1/4 of a stop, you're always going to get the same transmission of light through the lens. That's what T means. And that's one of the reasons why cinema lenses are often very pricey, is because you have just different kind of exacting requirements. So you want to be able to control the light with NDs to be able to stay at the optimum shutter speed or shutter angle, at your optimum T-stop or f-stop, and at your optimum ISO, which is going to be, you know, if you have that option, at your base ISO of, you know, 500 or 400 or 800. So you need to be able to control the amount of light going in, because you have limited ways to do that in camera. Okay, so real quick, websites and references that I think could be helpful. SonyCine.com. I actually worked on SonyCine.com a lot. I created a lot of content for it. One of the stories that I know got a lot of traction was Reels for Cinematographers, an agent's perspective, where I spoke with a DP agent at a big agency here in Los Angeles about what agents look for in DP Reels. We also talked to a lot of DPs about how they shot their shows and what went into the decision-making process, and, you know, just their approach to shooting Ozark, for example. And so if you want to log on to SonyCine.com, there's a lot of DP interviews on how they shot a lot of different shows that are popular and films. XDCamUser.com by Alistair Chapman. If you have any technical questions, or if you're unsure about anything technical, Alistair really knows his stuff. I mean, this guy does a deep dive. He's super, super knowledgeable. Anything that you could possibly want to know about video, he has the answer for. The ASC.com has a bunch of amazing Clubhouse conversations with DPs, again, on how they shot their films and how they do their work. And then FD Times, Film and Digital Times, also do some really good deep dives into articles like here, Top Gun Maverick, talking about lenses and the cameras to shoot Top Gun. So anyway, we're just about on time. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And if you guys have any questions, I'm here.
Wow.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well.
Jeff, damn, that was comprehensive. I don't think I've been so glued in. I mean, this really just hit the mark for what I'm interested in. I know there's a lot of other people out there who don't know how to make the jump, but I think it was the way you went about it, the examples you used. A lot of people, they can throw the information out there, but they can't really bring it home and wrap it up and put it in a way that you understand it and reference it with stuff that we know. So, wow.
You know, there's so much to learn. And it's been years and years of learning and being lucky enough to have some friends and mentors who have helped me along a little bit in this process. And what I've tried to do here is highlight some of the things that were surprisingly different to me on this journey.
Now, is your eye the same when you're shooting film? Are you looking at the same things that you are when you're trying to tell a story in still images?
Absolutely, because your eye is your eye. You know, the thing is, you know, as I said, I don't know, probably 5 times, as a still photographer, you're the DP, the gaffer, and the director. You know, on a film crew, you're the DP. So I am working with the director to execute her or his vision, so as best as possible. So it's a collaboration on a much higher level. So yes, they are The reason I'm there is for my sensibility and what I bring creatively and, to the table. So it's that collaboration with the director where they trust me to bring my vision and mesh it with theirs. And, it's just teamwork. But yes, it's the same sensibilities. It's the same. I'm still looking at the corners and the edges of the frame. And, I'm looking for balance and I'm looking for symmetry or, whatever it is that we're trying to capture in that scene.
Is the balance between like a DP and a director, is that something that's a fluid thing where there might be a scene where a DP was brought on because of their eye for certain details or something like that? Is it something where sometimes the director's going to have a little bit more pull and sometimes they're going to concede to what the DP's vision is, or how does that work out?
Well, the director is always the final word because it's their show, but a good director will always empower those to make their contributions and accept those contributions when they're right for the story and for the scene or whatever. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's everything. It's tough because a lot of stuff in the creative industry, it's like, there's no hard, fast rules. It's like, okay, sometimes it's like this, but then there's extenuating circumstances and sometimes it's like this, but I didn't know, it's a different world.
You're there to be a collaborative partner with the director. And so, you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't say, hey, how about this?
Okay. I think that puts it how I want to, how much is it just kind of like, hey,
what do you think of this?
Yeah.
Doesn't this look good? And that happens all the time because the joy you get, because the planning that you undergo before turning on the camera on set, you have weeks and weeks and months of planning. But then it's those little discoveries and the little findings and the little nuggets that you come across. Hey, let's grab that. Doesn't that look good? Look at this. Ooh, look how that looks. Sorry, I'm in downtown LA if you hear the sirens.
Oh no, I'm in the Bronx, so we're going to have dueling sirens going on. If for those who are getting started, I think a lot of this stuff is aimed towards people who, to inspire people to go like, you have me not even wanting to shoot stills. You have me wanting to take that dive. And I think one of the things that holds people up is, the gear, number one, that's why I love you showed that one video that shows you don't have to have a Venice to go out. You can get started on a phone.
Yeah.
Storyboarding, the planning aspect. For me, that's always been something that it's very hard to go out and shoot cohesive or good video content and just say, I'm going to go with no plan. I'm just going to shoot a bunch of random clips and patch them together. Like, you have to have a plan, right?
I mean, I think it could be a good exercise to go out and shoot a bunch of things and see how they fit together. But I mean, of course, look, if you have a paying client or if you're doing something for real, you have a plan. But, to your point, I really, really tried to emphasize with this presentation that gear shouldn't be a barrier anymore. That you have, A7S, A7 III, A7 Mark II, there are so many alpha cameras, RX, you could do something on your RX 100 point and shoot. You could do something on your RX 0. You could do something with your Xperia, and you can, I mean, and if you think about it, the way Sony has designed everything from the FX30 or the Alpha 1 or the A7S III up through the Venice, they're all in the same ecosystem of color and gamma and color space, and they're designed to play together in the same sandbox. And even the Xperia has that Venice color science built into it. And so there's no barrier anymore to going out and creating content and downloading it from your phone or downloading it from your camera The applications like DaVinci Resolve. I mean, my goodness, what you can do on your laptop now for $300 is, it's studio level stuff. And so there's no excuse anymore. And you don't have to have a plan. Just go out and have fun and just start shooting and developing your eye and develop that sense of trying to shoot for the edit. Say, all right, I just did that shot. What would work well with that shot? What am I shooting next that would go along with that? But there's no excuse anymore. You can rent, if you only have a 50 and an 85, for example, that you own, but you really want a wide angle lens. I mean, you could rent lenses now really inexpensively. There's no barrier to gear anymore because you can rent the gear if you don't own it. And like I said, the best camera you have is the camera, what you have in your pocket.
Yeah.
What's on you at the time. If you have a camera over your shoulder that you're walking around the city with, fabulous. If you're caught without a camera and just have your phone in your pocket, but you want to grab something and make a little film, people do that every day.
Mm-hmm. Look, if you didn't call out this was shot on the Xperia, none of us wouldn't. It wouldn't have even been a thought. It's not even. We don't consume content thinking about what it was shot on, right? We don't go to the movie theater and say, "Oh, what camera did they shoot this on?" No, we'll talk about the lighting. We'll talk about the techniques, other techniques. So I love how, they shot from this angle, or this lighting is really, sets the tone perfectly. Nobody's in there. We never would have known that was on an Xperia. I think there's so many other factors that if you're doing everything right, that's why another line that jumped out to me was about the sharpness. I was over here, hands in the air, banging my chest. I'm like, yes, like Jeff.
No, it's resolution and sharpness are separate. And I love having resolution, but sharpness, I don't want something to be overly sharp. In fact, Steven Bernstein, again, a real master cinematographer, director, looked at a bunch of my work, and some of his favorite stuff of mine was what was shot on the Xperia, because it was so, to him, very cinematic, because it wasn't sharp. And it was as it looked cinematic, it looked painterly. And that's what he liked.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you can do really cinematic stuff with an Xperia mobile phone. I mean, we literally took two phones, me and my friend Adam, who's another super talented filmmaker that I've worked with a bunch of times. We've collaborated a bunch of times on things. These cowboy friends of mine, I met them at the Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo. We've been friends ever since. They are the true cattle ranchers. They have 80,000 acre ranch in the middle of, an hour outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and they raise cattle. And we went out there for a branding, and we took two phones, and, that was a very, very brief cut down of what we did, but, it's a beautiful little pice.
That's awesome.
I mean, there are limitations to shooting with a mobile phone, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it's no slouch either.
Yeah. Wow. Jeff, this was great. And look, I promised you all, I told you were in for a treat, and we're going to be having more of Jeff. So if you guys keep an eye out on our website, we're going to be having more of these from Jeff on various topics, deep body of work, all great stuff. Every time Jeff opens his mouth, it's insight. So you don't even have to do much. We just have to talk, Jeff. I just got to get you on here and turn your camera on.
I can talk all day about this.
I know. Oh man. Well, huge thank you again, Jeff, for sharing your time. I know you're recovering. We hope you're feeling better. And
I'm sorry for coughing. Please excuse me.
I was over here. I was like, I felt bad. I'm like, I should have gave Jeff the day off. Should have gave him the day off. But
well, it's good we didn't have the schedule for last week, because that wouldn't have happened.
I can tell. Well, Jeff, go get some rest, man. It's a huge pleasure to have you on, as always. We'll look forward to speaking to you in the future. And of course, thank you to Sony for hosting today's event. But that's it. That's all we got for Jeff today. Another rendition of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.